United Nations on a Deathbed, Part 1. Translation of the first part of the article written by V.R. Ajith Kumar and published in the Malayalam weekly Kalakaumudi. During the Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union were dominant global powers, the United Nations made earnest efforts to uphold world peace and human rights. Today, however, the organization appears to be in a pitiful state. Like Bhishma lying on his bed of arrows, blessed with the power to choose the moment of his death, the United Nations too seems to be on a symbolic deathbed. Its end, if it comes, will not be natural. It will occur only when its member states decide to abandon it. The UN has reached this predicament largely due to its dependence on major financial contributors and its undemocratic structural framework. The United States has long been the principal funder of the UN, and consequently, American interests have often taken precedence. However, with the United States gradually reducing its contributions, particularly during Donald Trump's tenure, China has begun to fill the vacuum. China's influence within the UN system has grown significantly. It now holds leadership or strong representation in several key UN agencies, including the Food and Agriculture Organization, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, the International Telecommunication Union, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and the World Health Organization. Out of 15 major UN agencies, China is represented in 9. Additionally, it holds the position of UN Under-Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. Leveraging its economic strength, China has brought nearly 60 countries into its fold through global development initiatives. As the United States retreats from funding, China is steadily expanding its footprint across UN institutions. Meanwhile, new geopolitical initiatives, such as proposals attributed to Donald Trump for alternative global peace mechanisms, raise further concerns. Whether such initiatives will foster global peace or deepen divisions between nations remains an open question. What is clear, however, is that the UN cannot continue in its current form indefinitely. The Security Council, a council of power, not democracy. One of the primary factors weakening the UN is the structure of the Security Council, which undermines the organization's democratic ideals. The Council consists of 15 members, 5 permanent and 10 elected by the General Assembly. The permanent members possess veto power, allowing any one of them to block substantive resolutions. As a result, decisions often reflect the interests of these powerful nations or avoid issues that might conflict with them. The 10 elected members, despite representing different regions of the world, often remain mere spectators. These members serve 2-year terms and are elected to ensure geographical representation, 3 from Africa, 2 from the Asia-Pacific region, 2 from Latin America and the Caribbean, 2 from Western Europe and others, and 1 from Eastern Europe. Their election requires a 2/3 majority in the General Assembly. The veto trap. Interestingly, the word veto does not explicitly appear in the UN Charter. Article 27 requires the concurrence of all permanent members for major decisions. Thus, even if 14 members support a resolution, a single negative vote from a permanent member can defeat it. However, if a permanent member abstains, the resolution can still pass. This mechanism has often paralyzed the UN in conflicts where major powers have vested interests, such as in Palestine-Israel, Russia-Ukraine, Syria, and Iran. Since 2011, Russia and China have vetoed numerous resolutions concerning Syria, including those proposing sanctions or referrals to the International Criminal Court. Russia has also vetoed resolutions condemning its annexation of Crimea in 2014 and its invasion of Ukraine in 2022. It even blocked recognition of the 1995 Srebrenica massacre as genocide. The United States, on the other hand, has frequently used its veto to block resolutions critical of Israel. Another subtle tactic is the silent veto, where a permanent member threatens to veto a resolution, discouraging its introduction altogether. China has often been associated with this approach in matters such as Tibet and certain African conflicts. Uniting for Peace, an alternative path. Resolution 377, known as Uniting for Peace, allows the General Assembly to act when the Security Council is deadlocked. It enables the Assembly to convene an emergency session within 24 hours and recommend collective action, including the use of force. However, these recommendations are not binding, and member states cannot be compelled to contribute troops or funds. This mechanism has been used several times. During the 1956 Suez Crisis, it led to the creation of the first UN emergency force. In 1980, it called for Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan. More recently, in 2022, it addressed Russia's actions in Ukraine. While such resolutions may lack enforcement power, they carry significant moral and political weight. The Veto Initiative, a step towards accountability. On 26 April 2022, a new initiative led by Liechtenstein introduced greater transparency into the veto process. Under this mechanism, any country exercising a veto must explain its decision before the General Assembly within 10 working days. This initiative has enhanced accountability and provided all member states an opportunity to debate veto decisions. Although it does not limit veto power legally, it imposes moral responsibility on those who use it. The democratic deficit. The UN General Assembly operates on the principle of one country, one vote, reflecting democratic ideals. However, this stands in stark contrast to the veto power held by the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. This contradiction highlights the gap between idealism and geopolitical reality. The veto was originally conceived as a safeguard to keep major powers within the UN framework and prevent another world war. It was a pragmatic compromise, granting special privileges to the victors of World War II. However, the global landscape has changed dramatically since 1945. Emerging powers such as India, Japan, and Germany remain excluded from permanent membership. Entire regions like Africa and South America lack permanent representation. This imbalance perpetuates inequality within the global order. While the UN Charter speaks of sovereign equality, the reality is that veto-wielding nations function as super-citizens. The need for reform. For the UN to remain relevant, meaningful reforms are essential. At the very least, any country exercising a veto should be required to justify its position before the General Assembly and seek broader approval. Equally important is the expansion of the Security Council to include new permanent members, reflecting contemporary geopolitical realities. Without such changes, the United Nations risks drifting further into irrelevance. Remaining, like Bhishma, on a prolonged and painful bed of arrows, awaiting an uncertain end. In the next part, we'll explore who is blocking India's membership in the Security Council. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos.